quick video to introduce the document object model, its dot syntax and properties and methods. So there's a previous video which you could have a look at, which left us at this point here where we've got our JavaScript loaded in an external file. Now before we go any further with this, I'm just going to, for good practice, I'm going to place inside of this a function which is an anonymous function, so it doesn't have a name, and I'm going to put this in parenthesis, and I'm going to put a pair of parentheses on the outside there. And this construct, you'll see it used in other examples I'll post, is what's known as an immediately invoked function expression, and it's just good practice to place all of your code inside of that. So I'm going to move these, use the Alt and arrow keys of Visual Studio Code inside of there like so. So they're all inside of here. So this is where I'll start my code, and this is where I'll end my code. Okay, so I'll just save that and just prove true. Will make no difference to the file as it was previously set up for the last lab. So you can see it's doing this. Right, so now I've got that set up. Let's concentrate on this thing here, document. So document represents what's known as the document object model. And it's the DOM. It's a core concept in JavaScript, client-side JavaScript. So the DOM is all of this lovely HTML, which is why you should have been taught to write it in a really robust way so that tags are nicely nested and the rules are followed, that the attributes are all correctly set, because the DOM is then, if it's written nicely and correctly, the JavaScript is able to manipulate this DOM. It's a big object that it can manipulate it. So it's the document object model. So let's just show you what we actually mean by that. Just get rid of these consoles from the previous example and this one as well. And what I'm going to do in here is just going to type in console.dir document. So document is the DOM. So what does it actually look like? So let's go back and refresh our page, and you'll see that it tells me here that I've got a document, and I'm going to peel that open. There's all this information about the current page. So this is all information the browser can use and use to manipulate the content of this page. So the point of JavaScript is we can use it to do things like image rollovers, form validation, rollover effects on text. We can change text. There's all kinds of stuff, games, image sliders. There's lots and lots of nice functionality that you get from JavaScript by being able to manipulate this thing, the DOM. And the document is key to that because it gives us access to all of these features inside of here. So let's start off with a basic example, which was foreshadowed in the previous video. So if I do document, I can then use dot syntax. So I put in a dot, and dot in Visual Studio Code, you can see I've got these purple boxes. So these are what's known as methods, and then these blue boxes are properties. So methods are verbs, they're doing words, and they often take the form of a verb, then a noun. So for example, we've got set attribute, which we'll come to. But first, when manipulating the DOM, the first thing I need to do is decide which bit of the page I want to change. And this simple example, what I want to do is change that text there to read something else. So in my document, it's this H1 tag here. So I'm going to change that so that it becomes dot get element by ID. Then in parenthesis, I'm going to add in my heading. So that represents this bit of the DOM. Let's just prove to you that's the case. So I'll just stick this into a console.info for now. I'll move it back out in a second. So I'll just copy it from there, stick it in here, just switch it off. So it's just for demonstrative purposes. So I'm going to change this back in a second, and then if I refresh, you see there's that DOM element being picked up. So that represents that element. So let's switch that back. So now we've found that element, what we can do is we can access the properties and methods of that element. So when I put a dot in here now, we've now got properties and methods related to that paragraph, that heading tag. And one of them, as you saw there, is inner HTML. That's a property, and these are set all red. So I could just read that value, or I could set it by using equals. So let's change it to demo test. And if I save that, what I'm expecting is that when I refresh the page, it's going to change that value there. Let's try that. And it does. Okay, so we've been able to manipulate the DOM by using the property of this HTML object, which was retrieved with this method of the document object model. Okay, so that's an example of a DOM property. Let's show you, and also what the DOM property there is in a HTML. Now let's show you a DOM method. We've already seen one up here, but let's show you one that manipulates the HTML in a more interesting way. So in my HTML code, I've got a list item here inside of this nav. Now what if I want to change that? Now in the previous example, I was able to reference that because it had an ID, so I was able to use document get element by ID. So it's assuming a unique ID and able to be, so I can pick that value up. Now there are lots of these different techniques to allow you to access different bits of the DOM. So it depends how your DOM is structured. So let's show another headline one, because we can say document.query selector. And what query selector does is it takes a CSS selector in order to find the DOM element. So I know that this, what I'm after is this list item. So that's in nav ul li. So I could say inside of here, I could say nav ul li, and that will target that list item there. Let's just prove that's the case, because I could change that to got yeah. Right, let's see if that works. So I'll go back to here and refresh. I'm expecting that to change, which it does. And if I show in the HTML, so this is the live DOM. So you see that list item has been replaced by gotcha. So there was a link in there before, but it's now been completely replaced because the inner HTML value has been changed to that. Now, we've already seen inner HTML, so I don't want to do that. What I want to do is show you a DOM method. And a method I can use here is set attribute. Now, set attribute is a method and it takes parameters. So it's going to take two parameters, the attribute that I want to change and the value I want to set it to. So what I want to do, I've got in my CSS for this file, there's a simple little CSS property, a class I should say in here somewhere, which I can't find now. It's just called current page, there it is. So it's just a very simple current page. Let's make it a little bit more exciting so we can see it. So I'll make it really big, just for illustrative purposes. So I'm going to add that class to this list item. So the way I'll do that is I'll say, okay, can you set the attribute of class to have a value of current page? So current page is nothing special about that. That is the class that I created in my style sheet. So I'll save that, go back, refresh the browser, and let's see what we've got. So well, you see it's underlined. I think I probably just need to clear the caching. Refresh my CSS. And let's just wonder why the font's not any bigger than it was. There's current page, and I can see that being applied. There's the font styling. Doesn't seem to be making much difference there, but the underline you can see being applied. And I think, I've got styling on the anchor tag underneath, that's why it's not changing the size of it. Okay, but if I did something more interesting, let's change the, what could we do? Let's say text, shadow, and I'm making these values up, so don't know if that's going to work. Let's try it. There we go. We can see it's applied a shadow, so it's a bit rough and ready, but you get the idea. So the main point here is that you're able to set the attribute of that DOM element. The attribute of interest in this class, and I changed it to this value here. Okay, so that's a quick introduction to the document object model and the idea of properties and methods and the idea of selecting elements from the DOM. Technique there is get element by ID, or you've got query selectors. You'll see much more of these in later videos.